My name is Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong. I am Executive Chairman and CEO of a company called NantWorks, whose mission is to find solutions for patients suffering from life-threatening diseases such as cancer and infectious disease. I'm also the Executive Chairman of the Los Angeles Times, and I'm here today to present more information in an updated series on understanding the science behind the coronavirus. Very recently, my executive editor, Norm Pearlstein, shared with me a comment that unless we understood the dynamics of this virus, we could provoke an existential crisis. With that comment, I realized there's a huge amount of fear and consternation, and rightly so, but I wanted to present this episode today so that we can understand that we need not panic. The fear that is out there has been accentuated by three factors, I believe. Number one, the unknown, meaning who's infected, who's not infected. The unpredictability as a consequence of that. Number two, how long will this nightmare pandemic last? And number three, the thought or the feeling that this virus is uncontrollable. I'm here to assure our readers and those listening that the scientists of the world are hard at work 24/7, and I'm more confident than ever that we have now enough science and knowledge about this virus to beat this thing. Unfortunately, because the way the virus has occurred through this ACE receptor, the infectivity of this virus is enormous. And as I presented in our last episode, this virus has found a way to activate and hijack our body by taking on this ACE2 receptor, which is in our lungs, nose, and in other areas of our body, and therefore become highly infective. Yet, because it's done that, it is an Achilles heel, and we have an opportunity to stop it and attack it. In addition, this ACE receptor doorway, so to speak, was the same in SARS 2003, which means we as scientists have had a jump start in understanding how to attack this virus. So today, my goal is to present to you some more elements about this COVID-19. And unfortunately, it is my belief, in my opinion, that this virus is here to stay. It doesn't mean, however, it's here to stay and we can't defeat it. It's here to stay as a human-to-human transmission, and it's here to stay because it will mutate. But we will have, and I will share with you, our strategies in which we can overcome this virus, ultimately, and convert what we consider now a fatal disease, a frightening disease, to a virus that we'll be able to manage like that of the flu. Especially as we're learning day by day, in most rapid fashion, what's going on with this virus, what's going on clinically, how we can understand it, and how we can move on. I also want to share with you that it's my belief now that we can categorize this virus into three conditions. Firstly, the asymptomatic patient. It is one of the differences with regard to this virus infectivity that a patient could be infected and yet asymptomatic. I believe, however, that this is also one of the reasons why it is so infective. We don't know who's infected, and the asymptomatic patient inadvertently could be transmitting these infections through travel, through their droplets that actually contaminate surfaces, and inadvertently creating the spread of infection. And we'll speak to this asymptomatic patient, which happens to be, I believe, over 50 to 60% of the patient population ultimately, and what they can do to help us control this pandemic. But then there are patients who are infected with mild to moderate symptoms, who I call the symptomatic patient, and that's going from yellow to orange. And this symptomatic patient will have an opportunity today, with the rapid onslaught of the clinical trials, as well as our knowledge from SARS 2003, of what drugs that could be repurposed for the purpose of mitigating this disease and not allowing these mild to moderate patients to become critically ill. Which then takes us to the critically ill patient, which is what I call the red. And unfortunately, these critically ill patients have such severe lung injury and damage because of this virus and the desire of the body to fight it. Because the immune system is fighting so hard, it creates tissue injury in its own right and fibrosis and requires oxygenation and ventilation. Sadly, the results today are for these critically ill patients, almost 50% of them succumb on these ventilators, and they succumb rapidly. And in New York, that number is even higher. According to physicians working there and sharing some of this information with me, the fatality rate among those on ventilators is as high as 80%. So if you look at this yellow, orange, and red, we are now very rapidly understanding clinically what's going on with these patients, and we are developing strategies for each of these groups. My job today is to describe these three groups and the strategies of how to go about addressing the asymptomatic patient, the symptomatic patient, and the critically ill patient. However, at the end of the day, in order for an inflection point to occur, where this pandemic will end, and if the next pandemic occurs, we'll have ways and prepared to fight it, where there is a light at the end of the tunnel, is this race for the vaccine. And you've heard multiple reports of varying time frames of when a vaccine will occur, whether it'll be 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. I want to present to you some data today that there's some hope that it'll be even sooner than that. But I need to also put into perspective of what a vaccine is. How does it work? What's the difference between short-term immunity, long-term immunity? What's the difference between what we call humoral immunity and cell-mediated immunity? And in fact, what's exciting is how does this vaccine, so to speak, not differ very much from the attempts that we're trying to do with immunotherapy in cancer today to generate what we call a memory vaccine. So I believe that this race for a vaccine is, while exciting for scientists, will be the basis for the end of the nightmare. So my proposal today is to spend time going through these elements of explaining about the pandemic, presenting elements of strategies which are very real and learned since 2003 that we can address and beat this virus, describing for you the differences of this asymptomatic patient, the symptomatic patient, when the patient has to go to hospital, the severely ill patient, what opportunities there are to save that life and reduce the fatalities, and finally the light at the end of the tunnel that in fact a vaccine is at hand.